Okay, everybody, good afternoon and welcome to our Administration and Finance Committee on June the 4th. I will now call on Will Short, Committee, the clerk, to conduct the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Chair Redmond?
Present.
Councillor Craig? Present. Councillor Deutschman? Councillor Erb?
Present.
Councillor Foxton?
Present.
Chair Harris? Present. Councillor Hunick?
Present.
Councillor James?
Present.
Councillor Liggett? Councillor Liggett is there. Councillor McCabe? Yes. Councillor Nowak? Councillor Solonin?
Present.
Councillor Shantz?
Present.
Councillor Urbanovic? Present. Councillor Williams?
Present.
Councillor Wolf?
Present.
Great, thank you. Will, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I believe. Councillor James.
Okay, I have to declare an interest, an indirect pecuniary interest for report number PDL-ECO or ECD-24-001. I have an indirect pecuniary interest because I'm a paid mentor with the applicant liftoff.
Okay, thank you. We will. Oh, yes. Thank you. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gathered today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinantan peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. We will now consider a motion to reconvene into open session. Do we have a mover and a seconder to consider that motion? Councillor McCabe, Councillor Shantz, e-scribe folks.
I'm a yes.
Councillor Liggett, I'm assuming she's a thumbs up. Okay, there we go. Thank you for that. There are no presentations. We will now proceed with delegations as listed on the agenda. I would now call on John Glass and Jordan Baker. You have 5 minutes from the Waterloo Regional Heritage Foundation. John and Jordan, good afternoon. And thank you for your patience as we wrapped up some closed business prior to delegation. So thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for listening to us today. I'm chair of the foundation, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our long past and our recent past. We've just celebrated our 50th birthday, and we've been giving grants in the Waterloo region for these 50 years. When we received our charter, we were the first foundation in Canada to be operating in this area as a heritage foundation. During these 50 years, we've given away more than $3 million to 40 grants, or 400 grants. Projects have ranged grant values from $100 to well over $100,000. Most of these grants go into 3 buckets, be they building, special events, or publications. And the goal is to really support heritage and culture in Waterloo region, and we really feel like we're making we're filling a distinct need within the community. One of our first projects was was Joseph Schneider House, which is a National Historic House. Traditionally, we've received our funding from the region on a per capita basis of about 20 cents. That was frozen at the end of 2013. Back in November 2021, the region paused our funding, like they did with many other organizations like ours, and as a result, we we stopped looking at grant applications in January 2022 to see how we could use this time to better align with things. So we wanted to think, what could we do better? How could we make change? We saw that there was we needed greater visibility within the community, and we want to ensure that our grants were equitable and being given out properly. And they were also having projects that had value and meaning in the region. What did we do then? Like everyone else, we hired a consultant, the Center for Community-Based Research. The consultant helped us align with the region's strategic plan with paying specific focus to the DEI and READY initiatives. So we've got that information, and our ultimate goal is identifying and engaging with non-traditional grant applicants for heritage funding programs, and to verify that the grants are distributed equally and that the projects have a lasting goal in heritage in our region.
Thank you, John. So I'll just go quickly through some of the core findings and some of our short-term actions that we've been working on as an organization. Really, the core findings can be summed up into two core pillars, one of which is that there's a growing demand for increased relationship building when it comes to heritage and culture, and that there are expanding opportunities not only for funding, but also for engagement with heritage and culture. So that's the first core finding. The next is that there is a real distinct need for reflection and action plans around understanding who belongs when it comes to heritage and who is excluded when it comes to heritage, and when it comes to supporting heritage, and the need as well for us as an organization to reframe granting processes to increase accessibility and equity. So our short-term actions that we've been instituting now and that are ready to be executed on this fall are that we put together a new definition of heritage. Heritage meaning that heritage is what we receive from the past, what we live with today, and what we pass on to future generations. Heritage can be cultural or natural, tangible or intangible, and it can apply to all creations of the past that have acquired cultural significance with the passage of time. We've put together a new equity funding stream that we're going to be executing on, and we are reworking our grant application windows with an emphasis on greater visibility of grant opportunities for more people and organizations throughout the region. So our next steps are that we are going to be working on updating our website with this new information and processes, and we'll be working on instituting direct communication to many of the groups. There were 30 plus individuals and groups throughout the region that participated in the work with the consultant. And we'll be working in direct communication with these groups who participated in this investigation and to other underrepresented groups throughout the region as well. We'll be opening our first grant window this fall in September and October, doing evaluations in November and December with an announcement of first grants in January. We're currently targeting using our remaining 100,000 that we have in reserve over fall 2024 and spring 2025 for those granting windows to get that money out into the community. And we come today just as a bit of an update for you in regards to the work that we've been completing over the last couple of years on this to get us ready and get us really prepared for reopening to get this money flowing out into the community again. And that will be coming to council to hopefully have them consider reinstating funding now that we have a distinct plan and now that we're working very, very closely with a lot of different groups throughout the region.
Great. Well, thank you. We do have some questions. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your report. And as someone with a designated home, living in a heritage area, I know it's very important to have a grant program. And I know Central Presbyterian Church in Cambridge has been a recipient of your grants for the roof, and it's a beautiful structure. Once you've implemented this new direction, do you have a plan to review the effectiveness of this new way we're going?
Yes, absolutely. We're treating this as a bit of a pilot program over the first year of it, and we'll be doing some specific evaluation of that impact and working very closely with a lot of the groups in the region that we had been in contact with and developed relationships with over the consultant process last year.
Okay.
And typically, the projects you mentioned, those are our typical projects, but we needed to expand what we thought was heritage. There's no shortage of people that want money for stained glass windows and buildings and so forth. So now that we're looking at the grants, they come in and we evaluate them as a pool of grants. It's not a first come, first serve, and sorry, we're out of money. So we're going to look at, we categorize the 400 grants and we're going to see how the distribution changes.
Can you give us an example of some of the new things that you'd be considering grants for? Like in the past, it has been like for instance, a house like mine is like 1893, that kind of thing. That was your traditional grant or the church. Can you explain a little bit of what the new direction entails?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of events a lot of specific things to do with, cultural celebration. A lot of the funding that we had received over years, and it's been 50 years that we've been in place, has kind of followed a certain path, and it's been very impactful around what our community is, who our community is, that type of identity and belonging. But as you all know, our community evolves and changes over time, and so we'll be really focusing a lot of our energies on making sure that when we evaluate different projects that come in, that they will be evaluated within that scope of, making sure that it reflects who our community is, and making sure that, different projects really are not necessarily just, status quo type things. Those are important and will continue to be important, but we'll be really looking and working with a lot of those partners and new groups throughout our communities to make sure that they're aware that we can fund a lot more than just a building. We can fund a lot more than those types of standard things, that there's a lot more opportunity for people to get involved with supporting heritage in our communities. John, if
Thank you.
No,
Chair.
I was just going to say, we really, I think if I had to characterize the grants in the past, it was probably 80% building, 15% publication, 5% events, and we want to sort of change that balance and try and equal them out. I mean, it's not going to happen really quickly, and we'll look at it by first projects that we can get. I mean, it's getting the first couple projects in to a community or a group that normally hasn't looked at us as a funding stream, and say, hey, we can get money there. So hopefully that grows.
Okay. Thank
Chair
you.
Redmond.
Thank you. Really appreciate your coming in, and have sat on the Heritage Committee for a long time, and appreciate the fact that you're reinventing how you grant. As I read this, and I've missed a couple meetings, so maybe it was in the minutes there. So the new funding stream that is going to target new groups, a new equity funding stream, your suggestion is that will come out of the $100,000 that you now have in the bank that hasn't been granted over the past couple of years, and you will look to carving out some kind of new stream that looks at people who wouldn't necessarily avail themselves of the heritage funding in the past. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So I really appreciate that. And inherent in this is also an ask for the next budget, and I would assume that it'll be referred to that budget process. But it's great to see that you're moving ahead with some of the direction and the learnings that came from the consultant that came to help us understand what EDI might look like manifested in this process. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, we're in a test period, and we want to take this money and learn as much as we can and incorporate that feedback.
Thank you. And Chair Harris, I'm assuming that this will get, the ask for the new funding will get referred to budget process? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, John and Jordan. I'll now call on David Marskell, the CEO of the museum. David, and I see you've got a lovely lady, Linda, with you. So, Linda, good afternoon. Nice seeing you.
Oh, should I start over? My 5 minutes starts now, right? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Harris. With your permission, I'd like to introduce myself first before David makes some comments. I'm currently Vice Chair of the Museum Board and have been for a number of years. And in my retirement, I've spent a lot of time on a variety of boards in the arts and culture and healthcare and education in our community. I'm very proud of the work we do. And we believe that you support arts and culture in our community as well. We're here today with an urgent issue. We respect the fact that this morning and ongoing, you are dealing with some very big budget issues as you prepare for next year. We have a slightly more urgent issue that we want to discuss with you today, but we also believe it's not just urgent for the museum. We believe that this is a very vibrant, exciting arts and culture community. We want to maintain that and help that to grow, and we feel that the museum is a part of that. So I will introduce David, who needs no introduction. He's right here, and I know you have a copy of the PowerPoint in your package.
Thank you very much, Linda, and you can see our stellar board of directors up there. And hello, everybody. It's nice to be back. We are proud of the iconic arts and entertainment organization that we have built and the related social benefits that we bring to the community. The positive economic impact has been significant as we've just hosted our 1,500,000 visitor 2 weeks ago, which was a wonderful day. Thank you, Barry, for coming to that. And we thank the Region of Waterloo for your support and simply wish to grow with the community as we all get ready, 1 million ready. The Waterloo Region Children's Museum opened with a flawed model and should never have opened. We've been saddled with that underfunding ever since, having to earn about 75% of our revenue each year. It is the inverse of most museum financial models locally and across Canada, and is not sustainable. While other arts groups have closed or experienced declining attendance or subscriptions, that is not the case with the museum. Our attendance is growing back quickly to the 100,000 guests we served prior to COVID. I believed in this community and the museum, allowing my parents' legacy to be shared here in the form of a $1 million donation. The unsustainable model has eroded our other restricted funds, and our board has determined that we will not allow that to continue. If a sustainable model cannot be found, the unique donation will be used for an orderly wind down, ensuring we take care of our talented and dedicated team and paying all our bills. We are committed to finding a sustainable financial solution over the summer and have been approved for a one-time grant, a full amount of one-time grant of $300,000 from the City of Kitchener, allowing us to protect the funds set aside for the orderly wind down. A condition of that grant is in the notes, and I'm sure you've seen the wording put forward by Councillor Davey. We believe we have been a good partner for the region. We believe we've done a number of things, from bringing people from outside of the region, serving students from Galt to St. Jacobs, world-class exhibits, national media, so on and so forth. And we believe that we help to attract doctors, skilled workers, and nurses, and so on. We have created lifetime memories through an offering of diverse voices, technology innovations, and world-class programming. However, we are working in a vacuum with no arts and culture plan in place. We don't believe we can cut our way to success and achieve the same impact for the community in terms of economic benefits and businesses and the social benefits for our very diverse and growing audience. There are two scenarios for our community. One is with the museum and one is without the museum. Since 2016, the region has increased our grant one time by $63. As Governor General David Johnson said, it's something in the water. A KPMG report of a couple of years ago supported us working with a developer to create a greenfield mixed-use facility as a nexus for artists, exhibitions, a 500-seat theater, Indigenous galleries, STEM programming, family experience, and more on the park, with patios and stages for festivals, creating an architectural jewel and magnet for tourism and residents. We believe we should all strive for the highest vision possible in the region as we get 1 million ready. Imagine the vision of Gaukel Street transformed to a truly world-class street, and you're seeing that. We are committed to work with the region and the city to develop a sustainable business model for all key cultural institutions with an impactful purpose of drawing diverse audiences to the region and downtown Kitchener, thus creating a quality of life for all while contributing to the attraction and retention of doctors and nurses, tech, and other skilled workers. We appreciate the region's support and shared vision for the future, not just for the museum, but for all the residents of the region. Thank you very, very much. And this weekend, we will open Giraffe, a heightened experience, and we would love to see you come and join us on Saturday when we open at 10 a.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David and Linda. Councillor Verben, a question.
Yes, and thank you very much to both of you for coming in and for the work that both the staff and the board have been doing for many years with the museum to support it as a key cultural institution in our community. I guess I was intrigued by the slide that you put up in terms of the regional grant. So are you saying that in all of the years, even though there were obviously inflationary and other increases in the regional budget, there was no inflationary increase for the museum?
Linda's going to speak, but that is correct. There was, in 2016, we received basically the same amount that we received in 2024. There was a one-time increase of $63.
And there was, I believe, a one-time advertising
Yes.
amount for
Yes.
one of the exhibits, I forget.
For the Rolling Stones.
For the Rolling Stones one, okay.
May I add something?
Sure.
Councillor Urbanovic, just to flesh that out a little bit, to provide some more information. Both the City of Kitchener and the City of Waterloo have increased their grants proportionately with the rate of inflation to approximately about 14% in the last 5 years, and we don't believe that's been the case with the region. So that's been part of our issue, that the cost of running this organization continues. We know how inflation occurs, and yet the funding has not kept up with the cost inflation.
Okay, and my next question really has to do with some of the financial challenges that you have, and if I recall from previous conversations, David, that one of the challenges that the museum has is because you don't have permanent collections. There's not a logical stream of funding from the federal or provincial government, so you've been somewhat limited in terms of accessing some of those dollars?
That is correct. Clay and Glass, probably the Fashion History Museum, KWAG, those groups receive core funding from the federal and provincial governments, and we're not eligible.
Okay, and have you advocated to those orders of government to try to get funding?
Yes, we talk to them constantly.
Okay, and I guess the last question I would have, because just for council's information, it was our council in their motion of considering the one-time funding that directed them to come back to regional council as well. And I'm wondering if you can just touch on the key cultural institutions and how that came about, because there's a number of new members on council, to remind folks of that, and also how the museum became part of that.
My recollection is that the museum kind of came onto the scene when I arrived. Pretty quickly, we jumped in terms of attendance and so on, and we weren't funded. We were opened with a $45,000 annual grant from the region as a children's museum, but as we tripled and so on in our attendance, there was a need for funding. The Creative Enterprise was out there at the time, that initiative to help sustain different arts groups and so on, and the Key Cultural Institute, KCIs, was created. We were one of with ourselves in the symphony, and there was $385,000 set aside for each organization. And then, as you know, last year the symphony closed, and that $385,000 was then to be divided by other organizations that came on, which is great. You're funding new organizations. And then at a subsequent meeting, you reinstated our money back to the 2016 level.
And so if I can, the very last question I'm going to ask, Mr. Chair, is from a funding perspective, if you had at the very least, the inflationary increases, I would think that would be helpful. And, I recently saw a story that in the Record that compared the Clay and Glass funding and the funding that the region puts into its museum. Would it be fair to say that if the same sort of per capita funding from government came to the museum, and if the inflationary stuff was dealt with, you certainly wouldn't be in the financial challenges that you are right now?
That is correct. And when you take the one criterion, that if you take the attendance that we generate and divide it by the amount of funding that comes from the local municipalities, I believe ours is about $12 in terms of the cost per person. And in the case of some of the other museums, it's as high as $450, $28, and so on and so forth. We're the best deal that you have right now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation today. Just wanted to understand, because I've heard, I mean, you referenced this today, and I've heard you a couple of other times say that about the flawed funding model that you've had for 15 plus years. What's, like, that funding model is still in place. So what's prevented the museum from moving away from that funding model, and which you said has led you to this point? I'm just curious. Yeah, I'm curious about that and why that hasn't been you haven't been able to change that.
The funding model when the Children's Museum began was, I wasn't here, my understanding it was $45,000 from the region, and that RIM would flow money, and that didn't happen. As a result of catch up and trying to catch up, we are, even with the funding that we get currently, about $600,000 from Waterloo, Kitchener, and the region, we're still chasing 75% of our expense budget. So I guess you could say cut our expense and cut our exhibits, but there starts to be an implosion at some point where when you decrease your product, that you'll decrease your revenue.
No, I understand that. I'm just wondering why, like, why you haven't been able to shift away from that model. What's prevented you from shifting away from that model? Because you've referenced today and other times that that's what's prevented you from becoming more sustainable or more like other sort of traditional museums, I guess. Like, why has that shift not happened?
We believe that's not an expense issue, it's a revenue issue, and that's taken us to the notion of expansion and having simultaneous revenue generating events and so on. The issue is we're funded about 25% of what we do. So if we tried to bring that down and make the money be compared to what other museums are receiving in terms of percentage, we would be closing 2 floors, we would be open just on weekends. We wouldn't be what our board would want us to be, or many of the staff. We're not funded properly.
I understand that. I'm just wondering, in 15 years, why have you not been able to shift that model to some other model?
I'm not sure what other model. I mean, we're working with the city to look for other models right now. We're certainly not able to become a for-profit. We don't believe we can cut our way to success, as I said. So I'm clearly not answering your question. I'm sorry. I don't know what other models there are. The museum needs to be funded on par with other organizations in this community and nationally, and we would be great, and we would actually grow and expand if we could get there.
Thank you, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if, in terms of looking at the present funding that you're getting money from the region right now, 340, am I correct? 340,000?
385.
Pardon me. That's an increase. That's great. And you're getting 150,000 from the city of Kitchener.
166 and roughly 50 from Waterloo.
You're doing better every time, sir. And you're asking us for 150, am I correct?
The city of Kitchener has asked us to ask you to match their amount. That would help sustain us through the summer.
So Councillor Ivanovic is asking us. Okay, that's great. Anyway, just trying to sort this all out. And I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate the work and the museum in general. So we go through the summer. What are the fall prospects for survivability, if I may ask? What are you looking at? So I have some comfort in the request that you're asking for.
So we've met so far twice. We're meeting every Monday morning at 8 o'clock with a couple from our board and myself, and 2 people from City of Kitchener staff. We've exchanged bits of information over the first 2 meetings, and it's now in our court. We're going to come back next Monday with some different models, and some of the models, then we'll deep dive into that with the staff. I mean, the issue that I have a challenge with is, are we willing to cut 100,000 people down to 60,000 people or 50,000 people and be sustainable? Is that okay for the downtown businesses and for attracting doctors and lawyers and all of that? And that's out of my hands.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Councillor James.
Yeah, hi, thank you, through you, Chair Harris. A question for clarification, and thank you for coming in and speaking to us. So the City of Kitchener has committed the 300,000, that was the original ask, and there's an additional 150 that is potentially being brought forward to the region?
So we receive 600 each year in total from the three communities, three municipalities. Within that, the city gave us, with an increase, 166. We went back and realized if we were to close today, what would it take to close today? And we realized that if we took my parents' inheritance and gave it to severance and paying our bills, we have enough money right now to close. We don't want to be like the symphony. We're going to close with our heads high. And so when we realized that, our board said we're going to freeze this money, and if we want to continue, then somebody needs to support us. The City of Kitchener said yes to 300,000 to work over the summer for a new plan and directed us to split that with the region.
Okay, so I'm conscious of long-term here. Providing funding, what will be the significant difference in generating any income potentially going into next winter or next summer? That type of model I'm conscious of. I don't want to be thinking about, there's a Band-Aid here to just get you through, and there's nothing long-term to really say we are going to be sustainable. I'm really conscious of that. I also believe that this is similar to some of the asks we've had before. This should be put forward to budget, because I am so conscious of our budget and what that is looking like for the next year. So is there, and you've got, great board discussions on what that long-term plan is, like 2-3 year plan is for the museum, because we don't want to lose this asset, but what are some of those conversations that are happening now?
As I say, we are meeting with the City of Kitchener staff every Monday morning at 8 o'clock. We've met twice, and we're meeting every Monday through Labor Day to work through identifying certain scenarios. Maybe some are to grow. Maybe we could manage the Conrad Center, and maybe we need to shrink a little bit or share the space with somebody else. But I don't know what the outcome will be, but that's what we're going through right now. We have another 10 weeks or so to do that.
Okay, and how long have you been executive director, David?
18 years.
18 years. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Councillor Erb.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. My question, one of the questions I had is similar to what Councillor McCabe was asking, that you've been working with the model of the Children's Museum for X numbers of years, which hasn't worked. But why hasn't that model changed, if recognizing that it hasn't worked?
If you don't mind, I'll take a stab at answering that question. I would say simply, we've been underfunded from the beginning.
But that being underfunded should be a recognition that the model is not working. And why not try and change the model earlier, I guess?
We have been attempting, in particular under David's leadership, to keep the region and the city and municipalities and provincial government and federal government aware of our challenges. But the museum is a very unique organization. It does not qualify for the kind of funding that almost all other organizations qualify for. So there's part of the problem too, because it is the museum, it's like an unmuseum. It's very different.
Mm-hmm. And if I may, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'll come back in a second. Sorry, I know what I was going to say, forgive me. It is working for 100,000 people of this community. The model works, it's underfunded.
Another question or observation. So my understanding is that $300,000 that the City of Kitchener is prepared to give you will get you through until the end of August, September?
The end of October.
The end of October. So to me, it feels a bit like the symphony coming and asking us for $100,000 a year or two ago to get through until the end of a certain point of time. And we made a decision at that point not to do it because we weren't sure if we were throwing good money into a bad pot. And so if you do have so my question is, why to council is, why would we give $150,000 now if we know that there is enough money there to sustain the organization until the fall, rather than putting something in and it may not work like it didn't work for the symphony, would be a concern I would have. And I guess that's more of a comment than a question.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
May I make a comment with regard to that last question or your comment? I was on the symphony board when we approached the region for some funding, and I can't say that if we had received the funding we would have lived on, but we may have. So that's a question. So I just felt as a former symphony board member I had to say that. So thank you. And we do know that you considered very carefully at that time.
Chair
And thank you for
Redmond.
your consideration today.
Chair Redmond.
So I want to thank you both for coming, and I know this probably wasn't your idea. It was something that was directed by another elected body. You know, we go back a long ways. I go back to the original Children's Museum when it was a virtual museum. And you know, and then you landed in the old Gaudi's building, and you've done some really creative marketing, and you've done some wonderful programming. But one of the things, and I go back to the Birdsall report, which was a report that the City of Kitchener, City Waterloo, and the region helped fund a few years ago to figure out how we would rectify a lack of cash flow, which is really what it was, because you had people come in when you had great exhibits, but they cost a lot of money. Have you ever done the math to look at what kind of national and federal funding you would attract if you had a permanent collection? Because it seems to me, I mean, you're very open that that's one of the reasons why you aren't eligible for that kind of funding. And there's other, you know, I think of the London Museum and the fact that they have a permanent art collection. And if you had a permanent collection, it would make you eligible for those pots of funding. So has anyone ever done the math to figure out what acquiring a permanent collection might cost and the cost of not acquiring one when you're foregoing potential funding from those much bigger pots of museum funding that you would then be eligible for?
No, we have not gone through that process. I mean, having a collection brings a lot of expense as well and takes over space, which we don't have, and there's some downsides to it. Our model is almost an attraction, an experiential experience, and as I say, it is a funding issue that we have. And I mean, I can share with you, comparing all the other organizations in this community, which I've never wanted to do, but our back's against the wall now, and the inequity is unbelievable what's happening in terms of funding.
And I asked this somewhat rhetorically. You've obviously looked at other museums, similar museums, to find out if they have a special sauce or a secret that's working for them. And again, I'm thinking of the London Museum. There's museums thread right across the country, and you've been really active at the national level. You must have looked at best practices. Is there any learnings from that we can take?
I think Linda's going to say something. I'll say the ROM, the AGO, they all have huge deficits. Right now, they have huge annual deficits, and they have huge support from the Ontario government for the Royal Ontario Museum and the Ontario Art Gallery. So their level of government is taking care of them, and they have extremely wealthy people that bring in, I think it was like $19 million in donations from a very few people last year alone. So, and they've been around for 100 years, and we've been around for 20, so there's that as well. Linda, were you going to say something?
I was going to say something. Thank you. That's a great question, Councillor Redmond. But I think, speaking on behalf of the board, we're very proud of the fact that the museum is a very unique organization in this country, and in fact has had accolades from across North America, and as far as England and various other places in the world. So I think I would be correct in saying the board is in support of continuing a very unique and interesting, compelling place that brings thousands of people downtown Kitchener into our region every year. And I don't believe the board is willing to say, okay, we'll just have a dusty collection. And I'm putting it pretty bluntly, but we believe in what this museum has been doing and what we'd like to continue to do, but we need to rework our model. Thank
and
you.
I just want to be clear with that question. I wasn't asking you to become the AGO. My sights were a little bit lower than that.
Yeah, but if I may, you know, one scenario that we will look at is, can we share our space with an art gallery or another organization where they take over some of the space and that reduces our operating costs. It's got to generate people coming. It has to remain relevant for people and for school groups and so on and so forth. So it's all on the table, as we've been saying to the staff at the City of Kitchener, that we try to find something that works. I think we all want it to work, and ideally for me, at 100,000 or in a few years, 200,000 people as we grow with the community.
Councillor Huenick.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Thank you, David and Linda, for coming. It's always a pleasure to see you. I love the museum. I support it personally. Chair Redmond half asked my question already because she's cool like that. But I wonder if you can just clarify. Do you know, can you let the rest of us know why it is that other museums receive provincial and federal funding and the museum does not?
I don't want to mislead you, and I've said a collection. That's just one piece of it. I mean, I can go back and share through the clerk some more information about what makes one eligible at the for clay and glass and the other museums that we've been talking about. A collection is but one piece of it, so I'd have to look into that.
I would suggest that it doesn't need to be an either or, right? A permanent collection doesn't mean you can't have a rolling collection as well. And I think it's worth noting that according to the math that you've stated, even if the region cannot contribute more funding to the museum in Kitchener today, we are still contributing more on an annual basis than the City of Kitchener. We value the museum, we love the museum, but the region has many costs and considerations to be aware of.
Fully understand that, and we appreciate the support that the region has shared, and it needs to continue at least the level that we've been enjoying through the August report that comes back, because if we go backwards there's not much hope left.
Thank you again.
Councillor Salonen.
My question actually already got answered, but thank you very much for coming today.
Councillor Craig.
I'm assuming you've already, if I may, Mr. Chair, through you, that you've been in contact with the local MPs in the area about funding. Am I correct?
Yes, the MPPs and the MP. And some of you may be aware, you're probably all aware of what Mike Morris identified, that federally this community is under, in terms of population, we receive much less for arts funding than other communities across Canada our size. It in itself is an inequity that I'm glad that Mike brought that forward, and I hope that people are talking to the federal government about that.
Well, it would seem to me, if I may, Mr. Chair, through you, that with the political support of regional council and the cities of Kitchener and in the community, throughout the regional community, speaking to the MPs, that they can work around this nonsense about the funding model that doesn't allow you in.
I will go back to each of them tomorrow morning, I promise.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Verbenovich.
I'm actually was looking to make a comment and then a motion, but you want to wait until later on to deal with that, or?
You're the last speaker, so I would think this is the appropriate time following your remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I will move the motion for the requested funding allotment, and if I can speak to it briefly. You know, we just last week sat through the chair's State of the Region speech, and we talked about being 1 million ready. And part of being 1 million ready is creating the kind of community that is going to ensure that we not only attract talent to the community, but that we can retain talent to the community. And consistently, when we talk to our partners in economic development in all different sectors, the thing that they often talk about the most is about ensuring that we build that we invest and build and create cool communities that people are going to want to live, work, and play in. And so, you know, we talk about being a world-class region. We talk about the importance of this stuff. And, you know, I was surprised to see that chart today. You know, in just a little bit, we're going to be dealing with, you know, a suggested budget increase for next year of 12.8%. We dealt with a budget increase last year of 8-point-something%, as I recall. And yet the increases that we've made in terms of you know, our contribution to organizations, in fact, hasn't gone up even with, you know, some inflationary amount going forward, which I think has probably, you know, led to some of the problem that that the museum is finding themselves in. And that doesn't even get to, I think, the broader question that we need to talk about in terms of, you know, equity between government-funded organizations in this space and not-for-profits in this space, which, you know, I think is something that will, you know, I think while we are obviously proud operators, we also need to ask ourselves, you know, how do we rationalize these differences in funding going forward? And I think that's something that we'll need to explore and dialogue about in the upcoming budget. But having said that, you know, the museum is an important institution. It is one of two key cultural institutions that are left. The comment was made in terms of, you know, funding and the challenges around the symphony. I think my hope, and I hope our hope, is that we don't see them go down that path. That, you know, are there any guarantees? No, but I'm glad that they've reached out to the city. I'm glad that they've reached out here and are looking to try to find a path and do it in a way that, you know, doesn't reach a crisis point like we found ourselves in with the symphony. So I will move that, and hopefully council can see their way to supporting this. Thank you.
Okay, so I do have some more speakers, but we're on round 3 for some of them. So, Councillor Craig, are you interested in saying something briefly? And I will say, Councillor Verbanovic, obviously, if you want to bring forward a motion, we will need to waive that notice first.
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
So we'll need to bring the waiving of notice first.
Hey, waive.
Okay,
but
so how about we do this?
Had a delegation.
Okay, so how about we have a delegation still before us? Are there any other questions for the delegation? Okay, seeing none, so thank you to you both. And now we'll deal with the waiving of notice. This is a delegation, Councillor Verbanovic, so if you, pardon me? Okay, so seconded by Councillor Craig. Okay, so we have a motion from Councillor Verbanovic to waive notice for a motion he intends to bring here. So colleagues, I'll ask you to go to eScribe when the clerks are ready to put that up.
Can I ask a question of process?
Sure.
The previous council, we had a similar situation and said we weren't going to go there. So what's different today?
Well, you've got a member of council who has waived notice. And so we're going to address the waiving of notice. So we'll have to wait for the outcome of that to happen and see the result of that. So I know you're probably referring to yours, and I don't know if notice was waived, but I know a deferral motion was put forward, and that was passed, and so that's why there was a difference in both of these. So over to eScribe for folks to do.
Jeez.
Is this the amount they gave us, we gave them? And then that's the inflation amount that it should have been?
So the threshold is 2/3? The threshold for this to pass now would be 2/3, so just, And that number would be what?
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe? No, she's. Okay, so that motion is defeated. So, yes, you can file notice.
Yeah,
for.
Mr. Chair, I'll just provide notice, and I'll do it in writing, that I'll provide notice for the meeting on the
correct
on the 19th.
Yeah. Okay.
I will say that I do think we need to. I think we need to have some clarity around the procedural bylaw, because if an item is on the agenda, then it is germane to this meeting of council, and I think we need to. Like it's.
Yeah, I guess Councillor Benedict, I mean, if we were to, allow the public to register delegations, and then entertain business, on a whim because of a delegation, that's not how any council would frankly work. So I think we have a pretty good set of procedures as it relates to motions. You could have filed that motion, ahead of time. That would have been heard today for the delegation. But now, because the waiving of notice was defeated, we will hear that motion at next council meeting.
That's fine, Mr. Chair. I will do that, but I still do believe that we need to look at our procedural bylaw, because I can tell you that's not certainly how we work. Maybe, and it's not how we've always worked here in the past. It seems to be that we're moving more in this direction these days, and I think that's a broader conversation for another day. Thank you.
Possibly. I know I have a motion myself today that's related to an actual agenda item, and I expect that to be heard at next council, because I'm not going to ask for the waiving of notice to deal with that today. So we will carry on with the agenda. We have no items under the consent agenda. We do have our regular agenda starting with 8.1, strategic priority homes for all. I would like to welcome up here our Acting Commissioner of Corporate Services and Chief Financial Officer, Cheryl Braun. So Cheryl, welcome to the committee, and I'll let you speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair Harris, and through you to Council. First report on your agenda is a report with the staff recommendation. The purpose of the report is to allocate grants under the Entrepreneurial Grant Stream in accordance with the region's discretionary grant policy and framework endorsed in August of 2022. There were 14 applications received, and 6 applicants met the criteria for the stream and are being recommended for funding. Further details regarding the applicants and the allocations are in the appendix to the report, and the recommended funding allocation totals $68,400, which aligns with the council-approved budget provision for 2024. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Any questions, Councillor Hunick?
Through the chair. Thank you, Ms. Braun. The entrepreneurial grant stream was really encouraging and really made me proud to be in this region and to live with the entrepreneurs who live in it. So thank you very much.
Colleagues, I don't have any other questions, and so there is a staff recommendation with the report, and I'll read that recommendation: that the regional municipality of Waterloo adopts the staff recommended funding allocations totaling $68,400 as set out in the appendix Economic Development Entrepreneurial Initiative Grant Program funds in the report dated June 4th. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Fox and seconded by an eager Councillor Hunick. Colleagues, over to eScribe. Yes, so that is carried, folks. 8.2, strategic priority, climate-aligned growth. I'll call upon Cheryl Braun, the acting commissioner, to speak to the report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. This second report before you also has a staff recommendation. The purpose of the report is to allocate grants under the Community Environmental grant program that was established in October of 2011 to provide funding for stewardship and sustainability projects throughout the region. There were 16 applicants who met the criteria for the stream and are being recommended for funding. Further details regarding the projects being funded are included in the appendix of the report. Recommended funding allocations total $90,000, which aligns with Council's approved budget provision for 2024. With that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Councillor Hunick, you're back in the queue.
I found this to be similarly encouraging, and I would be happy to move it, Chair Harris.
Okay, great. Moved by Councillor Hunick. I'll get a seconder, and I'll go back to Councillor Foxon. Chair Redmond for a question.
I just wanted to note, and I've just lost my place in the queue here, but Trees for Woolwich tree planting did get $10,000 under this envelope, and I know that they have been to visit us and tell us what stuff they're doing already to improve Woolwich, and I was glad to see that they were successful in this instance.
Okay. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious with these grants and your other grants, if you consider any geographical equity in terms of where the applicants are from, as in, like, do you try to make it, across the region, or do you just look at the criteria in terms of, entrepreneurship or the environment, and if they all happen to be from one area, that didn't matter?
Just to clarify through you, Chair, the question, are you asking about the criteria under which the program is governed? If that's the case, I'd have to call on staff who are in the gallery, Megan Eastwood. I believe she's responsible for determining those criteria and applying the criteria.
Thank you. Through the chair. So we don't specifically look at the geographic distribution. We really look at the merit of the applicant first, but we are not constrained in any way. So we encourage applicants from across the region. So it isn't really driven by a geographic consideration solely. It's entirely merit-based. And we do actually see quite a nice spread, that being said, though, in terms of who is a successful recipient.
Okay. All right, thank you, because I think it's important that we do see that spread, and also that the information is spread throughout the region to know to even apply for the grant, because I find that, it tends to be a problem. Like, I know, like, even in committees, out of 45 members, we have 2 from Cambridge, basically. So it's sort of, we don't seem to get the information necessarily, so that when we're looking for equity, I think we also have to look for equity amongst the entire region. Thank you.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. I would definitely agree with Councillor Wolf on her comment, just for ensuring that we add a geographical element. But I was also just curious if you could speak to how you come up with the recommended funding versus obviously the request. I can appreciate we get way more applications and asks than what we have money for. I guess I'm just curious if we look at if we reduce the funding to a certain amount, if it's not even a viable project anymore, for example.
Thank you. And through the chair, we actually often have a dialogue with the applicants. So my colleagues here do a really nice job of reaching out and asking them that very question. If there is a threshold, under which it's no longer viable. And it's quite casual and friendly in that regard. So we do take that into account. Most applicants understand that they sort of aim high, and we provide what we can. We do really try to ensure that it's spread across a large number of applicants, just so we can see a lot of those really successful small programs take off that otherwise wouldn't get large pots of funding. So yes, to your question, yes, we do, and check on viability.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you. I'm just surprised that there's several grants for North Dumfries Township. The Branchdon Forest Management Project, the Berries Lake Wetland Restoration, also I'm not saying I want to take it away from me, but I want to say thank you. These people work really, really hard to maintain an environment. A lot of it's environmentally sensitive areas that they're protecting. And they may have applied for a larger amount, but any amount I'm sure they would appreciate. So thank you.
Councillor Hewinik.
Thank you, Chair. Am I correct in understanding that very few applicants who applied actually didn't meet the criteria or didn't get funding?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. We only had one, and we did have a nice dialogue with them that they understood it wasn't really the right fit, and we are hopeful in finding them funding from another available small pot. So yes, we have a lot of successful applicants this year, so that's great.
Excellent. Thank you.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you. I think this is all good news. And, you know, I keep thinking that there's this environmental theme that keeps being repeated throughout all of our standing committees, and this contributes to it as well. Can you just talk really briefly, and I probably should know the answer, but how we let groups know so they can apply, because you really react to the people who apply. So the comments about going to every corner of the region, there's no reason we can't. It's just what the applications are in. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about how people are made aware, and maybe watching this wonderful YouTube footage will be information groups can use in the future.
And through the chair, thank you. Usually we do a social media blast through our various platforms. We also often send out a note to successful applicants who have applied in the past that we have a longstanding relationship, just letting them know. It's updated on our website as well, and so we encourage people to visit that. But that's something that we could try to expand even further, working with our really strong communications team to make sure that every corner does indeed know about this. But usually it's through social media, Facebook, that kind of thing is how we find the most success in getting the word out.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. We do have a motion on the table that was moved by Councillor Hewinik, seconded by Councillor Foxton, that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approve funding allocations totaling up to $90,000 from the Community Environmental Fund to support 16 stewardship and sustainability projects as described in the report. All those in favor, over to E-Scribe. And that is carried, colleagues. We have 8.3, equitable services and opportunities. Again, major arts and cultural organizations, 2024 grant recommendations. I'll call again on Cheryl Braun, Acting Commissioner of Corporate Services, to speak to the report. Cheryl.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, this is the third report with a staff recommendation related to granting to community groups. The purpose of the report is to allocate grants under the Major Arts and Cultural Organization Grant Program in accordance with the region's discretionary grant policy. This particular grant program was established in 2023 to capture organizations that were not eligible under the key cultural institutions criteria. And in 23, it was funded on a one-time basis from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. For the 24 budget, a provision of $306,000 was approved. And for 2024, there were 13 applications received and 10 applicants met the criteria for the stream and are being recommended for funding. Further details regarding the applicants and allocations are included in the appendix of the report. This budget provision obviously aligns with Council's approved budget provision for 2024 of $306,000.
I believe this is where we've got the conflict on this one, Councillor James. No, I'm sorry. Okay, I don't see any questions, so can we have a mover and a seconder on that, Councillor?
Oh, I have a question. My hand's up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Liggett.
I'm wondering if we could remove one of the entities off the list until there's some things cleared up with them. I'm not trying to remove them completely, but there is one that we have concerns with at the city, and we have been waiting for information for a few months from them that's still lagging, and some of the concerns go back to last year.
So, Councillor Liggett, perhaps an amendment or a deferral of this recommendation would be maybe more appropriate.
Sure. The deferral's fine.
So a deferral of It would be 8-3. No, sorry. I guess just to allow for some more time. Hang on a second, Councillor Liggett.
I've sent it to you, Councillor Harris. I've sent it to Cheryl Braun, Karen Redmond, and Matthew Getsky, my concerns.
Yep, let's take two minutes, and I think we've got a solution, Councillor Liggett, to what you're asking
Okay.
for. That would not be the deferral. So hang tight. They're going to work on this, and we're going to take 3 minutes because I need back at it if you don't mind here. Councillor James, you're on the docket to ask a question or speak.
You all did the work that I was just going to ask to do to see if we could separate it or whatever. So whatever.
No, yeah,
don't
I
need
think
to
we've got some resolution on this, Councillor Liggett. We haven't got a mover and a seconder yet, but I think there is, resolution of some sort. So I will ask for a mover and a seconder.
No one giving
Well-
to give this money to some group that is not accountable.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Craig.
Has the Fashion Museum met the criteria for the region of Waterloo?
I'll let Finance Representative speak to that.
Through you, Chair, and I believe we have staff in the gallery, Julian, who should be able to answer about the allocation criteria.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the Fashion Museum does meet the criteria for the grant program.
I'm sorry, what do you say?
Does me?
Does meet, yes.
Doesn't?
Does.
Does.
Okay.
Does
Well,
indeed
I can't
meet.
hear it. Yeah. So it does meet. Okay, thank you. So then what's the argument?
Councillor Foxon?
So do we just accept an application and not look at any history or anything else, or where any research at all in these groups?
Through the chair, the application involves the finances of the group. In this case, it didn't involve the details of a rent dispute between the museum and the city. From the point of view of the grant program, that dispute is between the museum and the city. It's not between us and the program.
Councillor James.
Thanks through you, Chair. I have significant concerns if we are just granting money to organizations and there is a non-compliance in the scope of relationships with other municipalities. I think that is something to be, it's concerning. I thanks Councillor Liggett for just stating something, because we have to be extremely responsible and fiscally responsible with our money, especially in this day and the point in time we're in right now. I never want to say we don't support arts and culture, because I know that's how quickly the narrative changes, but there is financial responsibility for every single organization who takes money from the government or is granted money from government. So it's something to seriously consider, as opposed to just saying they met the criteria, so here we go, when the realities are that part of running a nonprofit, a charity, a museum, all of that is about financial responsibility as well to taxpayers in this case. So I'll just say that I support amending the motion for Councillor Liggett, and I'm happy to second that.
What about a deferral, Councillor James? I think that perhaps may be the most appropriate step to allow a few weeks here to sort some of these things out.
Yeah, I would put forward a deferral to find out more information if needed.
Okay, so deferral moved by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Fox. And Councillor Liggett, hopefully you're open to that as well, and it allows staff to have some discussions with
Yes.
those that have further questions around this, in order to not, impact the others on this. At the end of the day, we'll come back. It's the 19th. It's a Wednesday. Yeah, we're going to have to come back on the 19th and ratify this anyways. So let's do that. So a motion to defer is in eScribe, will be posted shortly on eScribe to vote.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councillor Craig.
Are we going to inform the Fashion Museum so they're able to attend and explain the situation?
I think that we can ask the clerk's office to, will we proactively let them know? Is that what he's asking? Yes, we will inform them that this could obviously
There's
be
controversy.
well,
Okay.
that they're on the agenda, likely again, as a recipient of this grant.
Right.
And I think that also in the few weeks here, we can have finance staff work with folks to see if there's some resolution prior to council. So looks like
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can we pass the motion but defer just that part of it so that the other people are not held up by this?
No, Councillor Liggett, no one's held up, frankly, between now and next council anyways, so perhaps we'll have the clerks, no one's getting anything until after ratification at council on the 19th. And so, let finance staff, clerk's office staff, and others have some conversations that perhaps we can have some clarity on the 19th. And then if we don't still, then there should maybe be an option to parse that out perhaps and deal with the rest and ensure that the rest are not impacted by one. So I encourage everyone to complete voting here on the deferral. Okay, and that is passed. So thank you. All right. Yes, 8.3.2, 2025 plan and budget process and principles. Back over to Cheryl Braun, Acting Commissioner, to speak to the report.
Actually, through you, Chair, this is an information report, and the purpose is to provide a preliminary overview of the 2025 plan and budget. And we do have a staff presentation in the appendix of the report that we would like to deliver. And I believe Mathieu Getsky, our CAO, is opening the remarks on this presentation. If he's here.
Thank you. So through you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair Redmond, Chair Harris, and members of Regional Council. We arrive again at a key moment in your calendar where we start the conversation about how to approach our upcoming plan and budget process. So this 2025 plan and budget is an incredibly important conversation, and today is important to set the course for the coming year and years to come. As you know, this is a moment when we turn plans into action and where we make community priorities a reality through the choices and decisions that you make, and evaluate the potential impacts on the community. This community is growing at a level we have never seen before. We know that we're quickly tracking to 1 million residents, and with that increased growth comes increased demand for services, transit, water, wastewater, waste collection, paramedics, infrastructure, all this to respond to both existing and new needs and growing neighborhoods. I can understand, and you've seen in the report, there will be sticker shock looking at the current projected tax increase in the package, but this is only a starting point of the conversation, and where we will land at the end of the process will likely look very different and will require much work and collaboration between council and staff. As a region, we have shown that investing in community can achieve great transformation, and in 2024, you continued that investment across 4 priorities of our strategic plan, Growing with Care, which are shown in the current slide. No, going back to the previous slide, please. Yep, thanks. The investment supports essential services that everyone relies on every single day. So as you see, $472 million invested in Homes for All, $815 million invested in climate-aligned growth, $316 million invested in equitable services and opportunities, and $125 million in supporting the resilient and future-ready organization. And we are seeing the results of this investment today. Transit ridership is at the highest levels it has ever been. We're increasing the number of affordable homes and exceeding our construction targets. We are finding solutions that support residents out of chronic homelessness and increasing childcare, paramedic services, and improving road safety. And these are only a few snapshots, but the list goes on. And all these services are essential for residents to live a good life, but again, they need resources to be able to work and continued investment. Next slide, please. So going back to the strategic plan, we know these goals are incredibly ambitious, both for today and for future generations. And we know that the four goals that are before you there that you've set us are, they will still be ongoing work by 2028. But I believe that if we continue on the path that we've set and that you've directed us to pursue, we can make considerable progress and set in motion the change that's needed for the longer term. This also means we do have to make choices now on what comes first, what needs to happen immediately, which pieces need to be prioritized versus others, and at what scale do we want to act. These are the choices we have to make over the next 6 months or so, and it will be challenging. So next slide, please. Just for a bit of context again, we are moving into the second year of our strategic plan. This plan is our shared path to help us navigate the incredible growth and transformation of the community. But the pace and scale that we implement our Growing with Care plan must be carefully considered. Council must balance investment with service delivery, and everything needs to be and remain affordable. In a moment, Cheryl will give you more details about the fiscal context. The takeaway is that the existing funding model for municipalities is limited if we are to meet communities' needs today and tomorrow. Property taxes were not meant to cover the breadth of programs and services that residents rely on today. And you'll see there's a chart that shows that the 2024 budget funded $188 million in services that are really within the mandates of other levels of government. And this will continue to grow in 2025 as these needs and the needs of the community continue to grow. We also continue to experience cost escalation due to inflation and increasing capital costs. And we know that that happens also to residents and businesses, where inflation is creating unprecedented cost of living increases for everyday needs. So this is a difficult context, but not insurmountable, and we'll be looking for looking forward to the next series of conversations with you to help the region kind of grow and manage this. Later in the presentation, Connie will walk you through some potential principles that could help us navigate the plan and budget process and help give some early direction on how we can prioritize this, so we can bring back some scenarios to you that fit with your aspirations and fit with your expectations and the community's expectations. So I'll close my introduction here and pass it over to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Mathieu. And as Mathieu has mentioned, we've done some modeling for 2025, taking into account, next slide, please. We've done some modeling for 2025, taking into account pressures on our base budget, annualization of 2024 service expansions, the impacts of decisions made by this council after the 2024 budget was approved, and impacts for future operating budgets related to those in-year decisions, as well as anticipating some service expansions that will be required in 2025 in accordance with a number of master and business plans that we need to support our growing community. This slide attempts to categorize the budget pressures into one of these four categories. Starting at the top, we have a sampling of base budget increases that includes inflationary increases for contracts, compensation adjustments, utilities and maintenance cost increases, some adjustments to non-tax revenue, funding for our capital projects and discretionary exemptions, and the provision of reopening the Dune Heritage Village that was paused due to some significant upgrades in 2022. The second box outlines the pressures related to the 2024 service expansions. Some of these started partway through the year, so we need to add to the budget in 2025 in order to reflect a full year of service. Additionally, there are a few expansions that were in which we use the tax stabilization to phase in the funding for these expansions, as well as some temporary funding from Safe Restart and other one-time sources that need to be removed in 2025. So those will be replaced with levy funding. in that third box, in terms of council decisions that council made after the 2024 budget was approved, these include items such as increasing the grant allocation available for key cultural institutions, that grant stream, unbudgeted property acquisitions such as 70 Victoria, and the proposed 2-year funding strategy to phase in the waste management collection contract, which will actually be implemented in 2026. In terms of these first 3 categories, the total is approximately $54.5 million, which is the equivalent of an 8.6% tax increase for direct regional services excluding police. Further, there are continued expansions identified through master and business plans that council has endorsed. These include expansions for transit and paramedic services, which we've seen over the past several years. Also captured in this category is further investments identified in the plan to end chronic homelessness, infrastructure and servicing cost requirements for industrial land, and a modest provision for any other services, for a few other service expansions. Those total approximately $22.3 million. So all told, the total levy increase is projected to be about $77 million, which translates into that 12.8% tax increase for direct regional services, excluding police. Next slide, please. We do have a number of cost-shared programs for which both the need and cost continue to rise, but for which the province continues to underfund, in many cases falling well short of previous cost-sharing formulas. And this graph, we used this graph before. It is a pretty good illustration of how the level of property tax funding has grown since 2019. As Mathieu had mentioned, from 2019 to 2024, the property tax levy support went from approximately 104 million to over 188 million, and now in 2025 it is projected to more than double the 2019 level at 216 million. Next slide, please. So turning back to the projection of the 2025 budget, this graph illustrates the 4 categories of costs and shows that in order to just keep doing what we're doing, what has been approved to date, excluding anything council may have approved today, we would need an additional 8.6% levy increase. To get to anything below 8.6 will likely mean no further service expansions for 2025 and or finding adjustments to existing service levels. And just a reminder for committee, a 1% tax increase or decrease for direct regional services is about $5.3 million. Next slide, please. So this is a table of incremental reductions that may be required depending on the targeted level of property tax increase. So as you can see, it shows how much in incremental reductions would need to get to 11%, which is $9.7 million, all the way down to 5%, which would be over $40 million in reductions. And these are based on assessment growth assumed to be 1.75%. Next slide, please. And I think I'm turning it over to Connie McDonald to close us out.
Thank you, Cheryl. I know you've heard this a few times so far today, but I think it's important to say again that what we've presented today is a starting point, and where we land at the end of this process will look very different. To support all of us, and especially staff, as we navigate this process, as in previous years, we have drafted a set of principles. And over the years, under the direction of council, these principles have been used by staff in their annual business planning, and they've also served as useful guidelines for decision-making around the horseshoe. This year, we are proposing a set of principles that reflect past iterations, but also reflect the increasingly challenging environment that we find ourselves in. We also set ourselves a task to keep them concise, simple, and as objective as possible. And so there are 6. And they include that the things that we are including in our 2025 plan and budget make significant, measurable, impactful difference to achieving our Growing with Care outcomes and objectives, that they mitigate significant risk that the community or the organization is currently facing, that they maintain the course, investing first in existing essential service delivery and commitments that support the bold agenda that Council has already set for us, that it meets prescribed legislative standards or requirements, whether that's accreditation, compliance, or legal requirements, that they move forward time-critical items, service level changes, strategic initiatives, capital projects, et cetera, that must be done immediately, meaning they cannot wait a year or more. And of course, that they make fiscal sense, that they're fiscally and financially sustainable with an improved business case or equivalent analysis that shows it's affordable for taxpayers today and over the longer term. As we look at the decisions ahead of us, these principles, as you know, are not a magic formula. They will, however, help us to have meaningful and transparent dialogue about the options and choices that we face as we plan for the next year. Next slide. So staff have a considerable amount of work to do over the summer, including public engagement so that we can hear directly from residents as we shape the official draft budget to be tabled this fall. And I know Council's reviewed and already approved this timetable. So with that, I'll turn it back to the chair for questions for Cheryl or myself.
Okay, there's no recommendation here, but we do have some questions. So Councillor Hunick.
Through the chair, thank you, Ms. Braun and Connie and team for this great report. The prospect of a 13% tax increase is really horrendous, considering that many of our constituents are struggling to pay their current property taxes. However, I'm also aware that, or rather, I suspect that in comparison to comparator municipalities, Waterloo region is a relatively affordable place to live. And so I'm just wondering, Ms. Braun, if you could speak to if we were to go forward with the fully slated tax increase, which we realize is just a projection and will change inevitably. But if we were to go ahead with 13% increase, where would we stand in relationship to other comparative municipalities and their tax rates and services?
Thank you, and through the chair, I don't have that information in front of me. I can certainly take that back to staff to do those kinds of calculations, but I do acknowledge that we are relatively low in terms of our average tax bills in Waterloo region compared to other comparators. I just don't know if we were to add this 13%, if we would still remain at that level.
Thank you, Councillor Hunick. Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. In terms of the request for helping staff with prioritizing that Matthew was asking about, or reprioritizing, I would love if staff could bring back legislatively what we're mandated, what service levels we're mandated to provide, and compare that not only to what we're looking to add, but also to the base budget. Obviously, over time, the base budget gradually increases as different councils put in different initiatives and policies. And I think when we're faced with something like a 12 to 13% tax increase, we need to be reassessing what's baked into the base budget right now. So I would personally like to see that come forward during budget time, because at this point, I know I would not be able to support tax increases to this level, even if they are aspirational and on a track that we want to go. I think we need to reassess at the speed that we can go down that track so that we don't leave our residents behind who have to pay the bills.
Thank you, Councillor Salonen. I know the, speaking with Cheryl, message received. Gonna probably just confirm with them as to the amount of work that's likely there, but I will, as I explained earlier, have a motion on the table for consideration at council that I think could easily be, amended to include some of those items as well for clear direction. I know it hits on a few of those items that you have also suggested, so I guess, selfless promotion there on that motion to be heard at council in a few weeks. So, Councillor Verbenovic.
Well, thanks very much, Chair Harris, and thank you to staff for, I guess, sharing this very bleak and deeply concerning picture. I guess I'm just wondering, how much does staff look at resident affordability, and before they bring a report like this to council, how much is that factored into it, and considering what the impact will be on the average citizen who's already been through an 8+% regional increase last year? So, in 2 years, if this were to stay what it was, will be over 20%. That's not sustainable. And so I'm just wondering how much we factor into that.
Through the chair. Well, we are in your hands. We developed the budget and the projection of the budget in accordance with council-approved service levels and services. So if council wishes us to look at ways at adjusting service levels in order to adjust those costs, we can certainly do that. And I will also reiterate, as my colleague Connie McDonald had mentioned, these are preliminary estimates. We will be doing a lot more work to refine those estimates as we get further into budget development.
I understand that. And again, I recognize we're all different municipalities. We all approach things in different ways. I just know that my own council would be deeply concerned if our staff brought forward something like this as a draft report, and so I guess it's my hope, would have been my hope, that staff would have sort of pared that down and said, this is, as a leadership group, the number that we're going to strive, because we know that affordability is important. I think about the fact that just recently we approved the plan to eliminate chronic homelessness. Well, sadly, these kinds of increases are only going to make more people homeless. And I could not support anything like this on budget day. I want to make that very clear. And so, if we wanted to, from a direction, are you looking for direction today, in terms of where we're going?
Yeah.
No, I see it says for information, but when do we give you the direction? Because I think staff needs some direction, and from my perspective, I'd like to see something come in the 6% range, no higher. And so, what is it? And I certainly have some very definitive places where I think that needs to come from. It needs to come from administrative areas. We need to look at our reserves. We need to look at our capital budgets, and so on as part of this, because there are some key human elements that we also need to invest in. So when are you looking for that direction?
Well, I know Matt Chu wants to jump in on this, and as I had mentioned earlier, there will be a motion that council will deal with at council in 2 weeks, specifically to, crystallizing that direction, frankly, for staff over the summer as we lead into our budget deliberations in the fall. I will say that, staff was just simply reporting back on some of the numbers. And I will say to you that, we as a council have to self-reflect, frankly, on where we sit with these projections, because, post-budget approvals of 9.1 million post from the last budget are a big factor as to why we're sitting at the increase that we're seeing today. So, obviously, I know Matt Chu, I think, wants to chime in quickly, but, without waiving notice of a motion and me stepping aside, I'll encourage you all to have a look at that motion, provide some input and feedback. I know some perhaps already have, and I think that'll crystallize and be able to send some good direction with even an opportunity. And I know there was some statistics done this morning in terms of history. Back in 2014, there was a subcommittee that was struck of council to look at the budget leading into the fall deliberation, and I believe that's a suggestion that's coming forward perhaps for consideration in 2 weeks. I would encourage you to think about that because we all are going to have to roll up our sleeves, frankly, on this one. So Matt, perhaps you want to chime in on that question from Councillor Verbenovic?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just briefly, again, this is not a report with a recommendation or proposal for budget. This is really what we've tried to do here is to assemble some background information, do a very first, again, a very early projection based on some factual elements that we're aware of, some of the annualizations that we're able to tally, and some of the commitments that have been, or the directions, the general directions, I would say that council has provided us in terms of setting our budget lines and expectations for the future. So this is not at all a proposal at this point. This is really about initiating the process and sharing with you some of the very the strict, I would say and we've tried. This is where you can see the list of 6 principles that Connie mentioned. Is we're trying to be as objective and clear as possible about how we would identify the value provided by each of the increases, whether they're part of the base budget or whether they're part of future service expansion. So that's the information we wanted to share with you, to say this is the basis that we want to initiate the work throughout the summer to be able to bring you with a proposal in the fall. So it's really about also creating a sense of how, the importance of prioritization. So, prioritization is difficult. Making choices is difficult, but that is, that is the exercise that we're going to go through. So again, this is not our proposal or recommendation, but sketching the path forward with the criteria that we want to use to be able to help you make the choices that are needed for a sustainable budget for the region and an affordable region, both for the community as well.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess the only final point I'm going to make is, when we throw numbers like this out, all this does is cause undue stress and consternation in the community, especially if we don't have any sort of direction or plan coming out of the discussion today. And I think we really need to revisit this approach because I've had a lot of emails. Others have had emails, social media, and so on. And quite frankly, I can't stand behind this, and I won't. And I would hope that the rest of this council doesn't as well, because quite frankly, if we do, we're going to make it unaffordable for people to live in this region.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And I guess I take a bit of a slightly different viewpoint. I think it's really important that we put the numbers out there and we really demonstrate to community, these are the services that we provide you. This is what it costs in order to continue it, or even in some cases add to it, or as we added a 9.1 million after we finished the budget, we added 9.1 million. This is what it costs. I think it's really important to have that fully disclosed to people, so that yes, it causes consternation, and yes, we're getting some emails about it, but it is, I think, really important to show the community this is what it's costing us to run the services that we provide you. Yes, we're going to have to make changes, and we're going to have to get that number down. Absolutely. I don't think anyone around here thinks that there's anyone around this table who thinks that number's not going to change and change quite dramatically. But I think out of respect for all of our residents, it's crucial to put that, to be clear and to be honest and to fully disclose what that number is. And I just want to clarify, it wasn't an 8% increase last year. It was a 6.94% increase, which is significantly different. My question, though, having said that, is, well, so two things. Heads and beds, I don't know if it's captured under the tally, the ever-growing tally that we're keeping for services that we're not being funded enough for, but that's one. Heads and beds levy hasn't changed since it's either 1986 or 1987, and it's funding that the provincial government is supposed to give to municipalities, region, and cities that have post-secondary institutions, hospitals, and jails in them. And of course, in the region of Waterloo, we have all of those. And off the top of my head, I think the region's short somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 to $5 million, something like that. I know the city of Waterloo, because of the post-secondary particularly, we're short about nearly $2 million annualized since 1987. So I just want to make sure that's captured in there as well, and that we include that in our advocacy. Because that's a big number and going to continue to grow. And then my other question is, and it's a bit of speculation, but I believe tomorrow the Bank of Canada is going to make a decision around interest rates. Just wondering what that might, if a drop of 1%, if a significant change, say 1% or more in the interest rates, what would that do, or what might that look like? Kind of, could you ballpark that for us? And if not, maybe you could send that to us in an email.
Through you, Chair, yes, I'll send that back through an email. With respect to the heads and beds, I believe that's funding that we receive, and it's been flat for a number of years. So I'm not quite sure how you've come up with the gap, if you will, the shortfall. I can speak to staff further about it to do a sort of an analysis that way, but we've just included the heads and beds PIL revenue as it currently stands.
Okay, thanks. We did that analysis at the City of Waterloo because, again, we have those post-secondary. It's quite a significant hit. So if you want us to share it, we're happy to.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just want to provide some comments on this because it is a significant shock to the community. I as well do not support 12 or 13%. I also recognize that we are paying for, and taxpayers are paying for, a lot of things that we should not be paying for. And following up a little bit to what Councillor Salonen said, what is it we are supposed to be paying for versus what we're just being nice about and adding to. At some point, I believe there will have to be some hard decisions about what we continue to support versus, what we should not be. And as hard as that will have to be, I think that's something that we have to consider. I also think that there is a need to show this information sooner rather than later and be as transparent as possible with what this looks like right now. Because you don't want, people are struggling to survive. And I'm not talking about just low income. We're talking middle-class families here who are struggling right now. And if it's $25, I think in that report it said it was, a $25 to the average taxpayer. Well, no, that's potentially hundreds, if not $1,000 on top of their taxes, depending. So people need to know ahead of time. It's just, I know Councillor McCabe just mentioned the potential decrease in interest rates. That's not doing anything to people whose mortgage payments have gone up by $2,000. So this is a very critical time. I know that staff are going to start to go through this process and try and cut where we can or where they can, but the public needs to be aware that this is the situation we're looking towards, and we're boasting about getting to 1 million people. There's a price tag that comes with that, and I think we are paying for a lot of things. We just had an organization come here and ask for money. We're seeing that continuously. All of that adds up. And if we're not conscious about what we're saying yes to, at some point you just got to say, hold on a second. Does this make sense, not just for us, but as taxpayers and people who are part of this community who right now are really, really struggling? And as Councilor Urbanovic said, people are panicky. It's a reality. So I trust staff. I trust the work that you do. You all can break down numbers like I have never seen before. But we're going to have to make some tough decisions. And at some point, that Band-Aid has to get ripped off. And hold on, province, we can't continue this way. So just my thoughts around this. We're there to support you through this process. Just a reminder of that. Thank you.
I know I've alluded to a motion that I was going to bring forward for next the council meeting. So, as chair, I'm going to step actually aside and allow Chair Redmond to come in, and I'm going to ask for notice to be waived. I do think in the interest of time and the speakers list that we have, perhaps our colleagues can feed into this motion that would kind of crystallize or add a lot of clarity and direction to staff over the course of the summer, because I know these comments all kind of are very much aligned with that ask. So if we can do that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen, and I'm going to then go into my chair and ask for notice to be waived. And if it does, then I'll read the motion and we'll go from there. Okay? I guess that's one of the benefits of being chair today. So I'll pass it over to Chair Redmond. Sorry for the mess here, Chair.
So colleagues, I'm not Michael Harris. No. And we have a list of speakers, but Rhiannon is just going to put up the motion for which Councillor Harris will request a waiving of notice of motion. So it should be on your screen.
Chair Redmond, can you read it?
Well, this is the waiving of notice first, right?
Michael, do you want to read it out?
Yeah, okay. It was there. Oh, sorry. So whereas the region of Waterloo is projecting a nearly 13% tax rate increase, whereas the projection for services that should be delivered by higher levels of government is now $260 million up from $180 million in 2024, and whereas the region of Waterloo was formerly requested to the province of Ontario for the region of Waterloo in order to maintain sustainable service delivery and sound infrastructure within Waterloo region. Therefore, be it resolved, Regional Council directs staff to return with a budget that has less than an 8% tax rate increase, prioritizing potential funding reductions in areas that should be funded by higher levels of government. Regional Council directs staff to compile a comprehensive review of funding provided by the region to external organizations and conduct analysis on whether it matches a strategic priority area within the Regional Waterloo Strategic Plan, Growing with Care, and that Regional Council directs staff to conduct a priority ranking of funding provided by the region to external parties under each of the Region of Waterloo Strategic Plan, Growing with Care pillars: homes for all, climate-aligned growth, equitable services and opportunities, and a resilient and future-ready organization. So that would be the motion that I would ask notice to be waived for, which I believe would come first.
So Councillor Harris has read out the motion for which he's asking for a waiving of notice of motion. Councillor Foxton is seconding it. So colleagues, I want to remind you that we need 2/3 support to waive this notice of motion. So I'd ask you to please use your e-scribe to vote on waiving your notice of motion. Colleagues, that is carried. We had 10. We needed 10 and we've gotten 15. Thank you. So now we're back to the main motion. Councillor Harris, do you want to speak to it any further?
I think it was fairly self-explanatory through the discussion today, and I know my colleagues are all on the speaker's docket to speak to the report, and they can feed into this this motion. But it is important that, you know, on behalf of taxpayers, we recognize the fiscal restraints that we're in, other levels of government having to step up and fund. You know, there's only one taxpayer, obviously, out there, and we heard it today to the tune of $200 and some million that we're funding. We also have to obviously self-reflect on, you know, the increases in spending that we've made ourselves from the last budget to the new one. And we have to appreciate and understand the affordability crisis that taxpayers in our community are having to deal with. Increases in interest rates are putting a lot of pressures on home family budgets. It's no different here as a government delivering essential services. And I know staff is up for the task, but so too does our colleagues here have to be prepared to make some really tough decisions leading into the fall. And I think that this motion would send some clear direction to staff to be able to compile any and all information that we could use as a council to make those difficult decisions in the fall. So that's about it.
Thank you. And Councillor McCabe did indicate she was seconding. Do you want to speak to the motion as well?
No, I don't need to speak to it. I just wondered if it should be read for Councillor Hunick, though.
It was read.
Oh,
Councillor Harris read it before we did the waiving of notice of motion. So I have a list of speakers. Councillor Foxton, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The reason we came up with the 12%, or what staff did, is because of what this council directed. This is our responsibility. And everyone that comes to that podium and asks for money, and they pull at our heartstrings, and we're trying to find a way to fund them, we end up in this type of situation. It is our due diligence to do the best for people. So I asked my CAO, what's a 0.5% increase for a mortgage in today's market? He said that if you had a $700,000 mortgage, now a lot of houses in my neighborhood sold for $1.6 million in the height of things. So you had a $700,000 mortgage, that was $125 a month increase. Since that time, it's gone up about 1.5 to 2%. People were paying probably close to $4,000 a month when they bought the houses, and now are at $6,000 and $7,000 a month. And a young couple around the corner from me had a newborn baby, wanted to buy a house, $1.6 million. Their parents and their grandparents second mortgaged their homes so their child could have a home and for their family. We have to weigh on that every time we think of a tax increase. When we say, oh, well, you know, we've got the lowest taxes maybe or whatever, doesn't matter. In this society, people are hurting and we have to be responsible. I know there is issues we have to deal with, but we have to be very, very careful about who comes knocking at our door. And we have to play the hard line. And we can blame the province. It's easy to blame the province. Let's put it on the province. But the fact being is what we're dealing with is the face of the people. And they come to that podium. And we have to make some pretty tough decisions. And if we give more to the podium, we have to take from somewhere else. Because our society can't take this. Thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And it is our responsibility to deal with all the facts. And the facts are that we are existing in a broken municipal taxation system. And it's been broken for years. And there's no question about that. We can blame the province, or we can work with the province, or we can demand from the province. And I think that's part of the attitude that we got to assume. If you look at it in the history of taxation, we're working on an agrarian economy back in the 19th century where we only have property tax to raise money. And that's essentially it. We don't get the consumption taxes that go up year after year. Toronto just got $200 million 2 years ago. They then, a year ago, or just recently, got $10 billion over 10 years to get them out of their problems. Ottawa got $600 million, and they're waiting for more funding from the federal government. We're no different in terms of impact on the province of Ontario than these other large municipalities. Absolutely not. And I forgot to mention the land transfer tax that Toronto got a few years ago, that no one else got. So these are the things that are hampering and hurting. You know, I think the attitude, I think that Councillor Harris has brought up is that we need to work together. And in my discussions with him, and he's going to bring this up again, is to have a subcommittee work on this, not individually saying to staff, here, you go figure this out. We need to have a subcommittee, if not a number of members of council sitting down over a number of days going through the budget. These are unusual times and they demand unusual responsibilities and reflections from us on how to go about things. So that's our concern, and you know, we get into how people are surviving. Well, they actually are not surviving very well. And young people today, especially, if you can categorize it, there's no hope. They graduate from university or from trade school, whatever it may be, and they can't get jobs, they can't buy a house, and they're living with their parents, and they're the new homeless. That's who they are, with their parents. And it's really a sad situation. I'm like a number of parents signed off on a mortgage on my son's house, you know, and that's the kind of thing we do. And it's really unfortunate. The key to this is a new fiscal arrangement. On the 24th, we have a meeting publicly with the MPs and MPPs, and hopefully they'll show up, and we can emphasize and reinforce the fact that this system doesn't work, and it doesn't work. But I agree with Councillor Harris, in spite of all of that, we need to move ahead, and we need to work together collectively as a council, whether it's a subcommittee or a larger committee, and go through this budget as we, in turn, reflect on the fact that our federal and provincial upper tiers need to be more supportive, which they haven't. There's a long history of the province breaking agreements, not coming to the table, not keeping up with payments, as Councillor McCabe has just talked about. That's been ongoing for years, and they just ignore us. They've been doing it for years. And there's a relationship of a sort of adult-child relationship, and we're being treated like children all the time. And I've made that comment before, and it's in fact what is happening in municipal politics throughout Ontario. The best run governments in Ontario are the municipal governments, not the provincial, not the federal. And we're the best run. And we balance our budgets, we have open discussions, and we do our very best to reflect, and we behave ourselves at council meetings, not like question period in the House. This is the best run government that is struggling terribly because of the way we're being treated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So we have decorum, and that's why we don't need a whip at the regional council table, right?
Well, you've got one in the office.
I have one in my office from another career. Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. I'm still stuck on that apparently I'm homeless as I live with my parents, Councillor Craig, but that's okay. No, that aside, though, this is not a laughing matter, obviously, as we know that affordability is a huge issue. Thank you very much, Councillor Harris, for bringing forward this motion. I would look to propose 2 amendments to add. The first one be that staff provide a review of the service levels currently in the base budget and provide information on what is legislatively mandated for the region to provide, and that staff also report back on areas of overlap between regional and area municipality services. My justification for, the first one I think I already explained when I spoke a few minutes ago before the motion came forward. My reason for the second one is I know that Councillor Harris, you specifically refer to other levels of upper government, and I think that we need to be looking at the area municipalities too, even just the few grants that we just approved. I know in Wilmot, a few of those names came through for our granting process as well, so I think we really need to be looking and working with the area municipalities of not doing overlap in times that I know certainly in Wilmot we also have a tax increase coming too. So I would put forward those two amendments. If there is a seconder, that would be great.
So seconded by Councillor James. We're going to have to take a moment and put them up on the screen so we can read them back. I would also remind Council that in the past there have been 2 KPMG studies done, I think probably 5 years ago and 3 years ago, that looked at exactly our mandated services, what we do that other regions don't do, and what we have done to backfill areas that the province has withdrawn from. So I'm assuming you want something like that brought forward? Okay, thank you. So I will take about a 3-minute break here.
Break, take a break.
Up on the screen what the amendments are. So this is moved by Councillor Salonen and seconded by Councillor James, that the motion be amended to include that staff provide a review of all service levels currently baked into the base budget and provide information on what is legislatively mandated for the region to provide. And the second bullet is that staff also report back on areas of overlap between regional and area municipal services. Councillor Salonen, do you mean for external groups or all services? Because you referenced external groups that are being funded, and I just wondered if that was just shorthand because they were here this afternoon.
Yes, sorry, that was just shorthand. I was typing and talking at the same time.
All services? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Does everybody understand? Does anybody want to speak to the amendment? Seeing no one, I'm going to call the question on the amendment to the main motion. Councillor Vrvanovich.
I guess.
There's a lot of people in the queue, so.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
but will you be considering all amendments so that, like, I think everybody should put any amendments they want on the table so that we know what people know what we're dealing with.
We're going to deal with these amendments, and then I will go if there's further amendments, rather than stacking them up at this point in time for expeditiously dealing with this. I understand you want to make amendments, so I will ask people after we vote on these two amendments if there are further amendments people want to put in.
Okay.
Okay, so please use your e-scribe to vote on the two amendments that have been read out. Colleagues, that is carried. Can you just raise your hand if somebody else wants to amend the amended motion? Barry and Doug. Jan, is that a legacy hand, or do you want to propose an amendment?
No, I just wanted to ask a simple question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Craig and then Vrbanovich if you have amendments. Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. We were discussing how we unravel all of this, and the thought of a subcommittee working with Councillor Harris came to mind. And I think that it should be a subcommittee that anyone can ask to sit on to review the budget. So how we put that into kind of a resolution is what I'm looking at. So I would suggest that the amendment that Councillor Harris set up a subcommittee and any members of council can apply to sit on it in terms of dealing with the ongoing budget discussions.
So I guess I'm going to look for a little bit of clarification, because historically we have had every area of the region represented. So in order to constitute a committee, it would have the 3 urban municipalities as well as at least.
That's fine with me, Madam Chair.
So I guess I'm just looking for terms of reference. Is this something we can bring back maybe on the 19th that we can flesh out a bit?
Probably it would be best, okay, as opposed to stumbling over it right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the amendment is that there be a subcommittee open to all members who are interested, but terms of reference would come back to the 19th to be confirmed.
Thank you.
Councillor Vrbanovich.
Thank you. I'd like to amend the first operative paragraph in Councillor Harris's motion, and that staff be directed to return with a budget that has no more than a 6% tax rate increase, and further that we all, throughout the motion, we're referring to things that should be funded by higher levels of government or orders of government. We really should get into the habit of using that, or looking at our impact with other organizations. Nowhere in there am I seeing us really doing a comprehensive look at ourselves in that motion, and looking at our administrative expenses and what are the things that we could or should be doing differently from an operational point of view, as opposed to sort of trying to point fingers at others and other partners. So I think those are the 2 amendments that I'm looking to make.
Point of order, Chair. Do the amendments that the Chair, that Councillor Salonen added, does that not cover what Councillor Vrbanovich just noted? Like, isn't that what you're asking for through the amendments that you added, Councillor Salonen?
Certainly internal reflection was one of the reasons I asked, but I also am not positive on what additional information Councillor Grabanovich's looking for.
So we're going to
I just thought it sounds like it's duplication.
Okay, we'll take a 2-minute break and then look at how it looks on when it's written out.
Yep, thanks.
So colleagues, we're going to now, I would ask for your attention to be zeroed in on the screens, and we will have the amendments put up. And the first amendment is that staff be directed to return with a budget that is no more than 6% increase, and further that staff conduct a comprehensive review of the region's administrative expenses and what could be done differently operationally. So it's been moved by Councillor Grabanovic. Is there a seconder? Councillor Foxton? So I'd ask you to use your e-scribe and vote on these amendments.
Chair Redmond, can we separate the 6% from the operational review? Sorry, can I amend the amendment?
Has anybody voted yet? Okay, we will separate the two amendments. The first amendment we will deal with is the operational. Do you want me to read it out again? Okay. So we're dealing on the amendment to examine the operational expenses and if they can be done differently. Councillor Hunick, which part of the of the two amendments did you want to amend?
I would like the operational review to be taking place. I don't think the 6% ceiling is necessary.
So right now we're dealing on further that staff conduct a comprehensive review of the region's administrative expenses and what could be done differently operationally. So that is now what we are voting on. Please use eScribe to vote yes or no.
It's not on my screen, but I am in favor.
Colleagues, that is carried. So now we're back to the motion that staff be directed to return with a budget that is no more than a 6% increase. Councillor Hunick, did you want to amend that amendment? All right. Councillor James.
So with this amendment, this supersedes kind of Councillor Harris's 8%.
You said under 8%.
Yeah, so just to be clear, Councillor Harris's motion was under 8%, which 6% is, but it's a new ceiling, not a floor.
Okay, so it's just being specific. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Erb?
We all want a lower budget. My concern with what we're doing is what we got ourselves into through the strategic plan, adding things into the budget during the process here. And we're just making this very difficult for staff and for ourselves. And I just really feel badly like this is year 2, almost year 3 of doing this, where we do it to ourselves. And so I'm not going to support the 6%. I think 8% and under, as the chair of our finance committee recommended, is reasonable, and that we really have to give second sober thoughts to some of the decisions that we make, and then some of the pressure we put on our staff to reverse those decisions.
Councillor Hunick? Salonen, sorry.
It's all good. Thank you. I just wanted a point of clarity, and I guess it kind of applies to regardless of if it's going to be the 6% ceiling or the 8% and below. For staff, I'm assuming that's like a general tax increase, because obviously there's the area rated things that do fluctuate and change. Like I know in Wilmot, for example, we had a slightly higher tax increase than the average one for the region.
Yes, you're correct. Through the chair, that is the average projected tax increase, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Rabanovich.
Thanks, Chair Redmond. And I can appreciate, the concerns that some colleagues might have around us having to do some heavy lifting and staff having to do some heavy lifting. And ultimately, the decisions will get made in the conversations at budget time. But I think it's important, as much as we're concerned about us, and the very next vote we're going to be looking at is what's the increase we should potentially be considering for council. I think we need to think about what is the single mom with 2 kids dealing with when they're faced with this increase? What is the older adult on a limited income that perhaps doesn't have a pension index to inflation, considering and dealing with in this kind of circumstance? What are the people who have, become employed dealing with and considering, or the people who are now having to, and there's a large percentage that are going to have to renew mortgages in the coming year? These are the things we need to think about as well. And not just, what's the workload that we and staff are going to have to deal with in considering this, because those are the people who are here to serve. And that's why I think we need to be robust in our challenge on that. I can tell you in our municipality, the starting point is going to be lower than what we're talking about here. And I really want, I think we need to challenge ourselves with some difficult conversations.
Thank you. I am going to call the question. I am also going to make a comment because I can use the privilege of the chair now that I'm back here. And I would just have to say, I don't know what the public can support, and I imagine that there's a variation about who can handle how much of a tax increase. Clearly, we all have sticker shock, but I also heard staff say early on that about 8% was the services we currently provide and the obligations and extension of services that we have as a council committed to. And it's those very people that don't have a car, that rely on GRT and rely on the ION and rely on the services that we provide them. So I think that there has to be a balance between public expectation, public that are relying on the services that we provide, and ability to pay. And there is no doubt we will have to make very difficult decisions. So I'd ask everybody to now vote on the amendment, whether it's the 6% that's proposed, and then we'll move on there. And I will go back to any speakers that want to speak, whether the main motion as amended carries or this amendment carries. So please use your icons to vote for the amendment, which is that the increase of taxes be no more than 6%. Colleagues, that is defeated. So we're now back to the main motion, which was less than 8%. Do we need the amended motion up to look at before we actually vote on it? Does anybody want to see the amendments? You want to see the main motion? Yes, it is. Just before we go to our e-scribe, Councillor Hunick, I have you in the queue. Did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chair Redmond. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Foxton and Councillor Craig. It is our responsibility as municipal leaders to be fiscally responsible. And the municipal system of taxation is very broken. It is the only tax system that is not income-based. And so I really do hope that members of the public will join us in advocating to all levels of government such that we are fiscally responsible and the municipal taxation system becomes income-based rather than property tax-based. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just lost the speakers list. I know Councillor Leggett, I think, had to leave us. Councillor Harris, did you want to speak? Okay. Councillor Bravanovich. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Just really quickly, a couple things. One is the $180 to $216 million that we are supporting that should be from other levels of government represents 23 to 28%. So in looking at the budget going forward and asking staff to make some of those difficult decisions for us, or not for us, but for us to consider, I think, we need to keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Chair. I can support the 8%. I'm just concerned, and I don't have the motion in front of me, but where we would be maybe cutting out the things that we are not mandated to do. And most of those things do concern vulnerable people. And I would love it if the province and the feds stepped up and did what they're supposed to. But if they don't, I still don't feel comfortable saying that we won't provide those services. So I'm fine to go with the 8%, but I don't want to necessarily make it that we can't support something that's not mandated. That's all.
Thank you. And my interpretation of the amendment was that we would clarify what those are, and then we would have the debate at that point in time, rather than just take a scalpel and take them out.
Okay, so we would still make a decision that I have it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Does anyone else need? Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, just in light of that comment, I just want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that we don't provide those services. I'm just saying that that needs to be taken into consideration and will be part of the discussion. So just so there's no misunderstanding on that.
Councillor Bravanovich.
Thanks. I will. I will support this today, because at least it'll get the information moving forward, and then we'll, certainly continue to argue at budget time about the need to go lower. I just want to remind my colleagues that regional services today represent about 57.6% of the residential tax bill in Kitchener, and that's gone up almost just shy of 4% since 2019. So in 2019, we were around 54%. And we've seen it increase 1% per year. It went to 55.4 in 2022, 56.6 in 2023, and 57.6 in 2024. And so I think it's, I think what it's demonstrating is that, our regional budget is growing significantly more than what area municipal budgets are.
Thank you for that information. Councillor Williams, did you want to weigh in? You look a little lonely up there. Did you want to have a comment before we vote?
No, actually, most of the questions I had were answered, and I'm right on track with everybody else. I think we really need to focus on affordability and make sure that we're getting value for service and also just being reasonable in our decision making. Thanks.
So we're looking for a mover and a seconder, and I'm going to look to Councillor Harris to move. And Councillor McCabe. So we are now moving and seconding the amended motion as written. Okay. So please use your e-scribe to vote. Clerks is trying to put it up on the screen. So it is now up on the screen as amended. Please use your icons to vote. Colleagues, that is carried. I will now ask Councillor Harris if he wants to swap out, or should I just move to adjourn?
All right. It appears that we're going to defer the remaining portions of the Finance and Audit Committee meeting until June 19th. So can I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Hunick and Councillor Chair Redmond, all those in favor, head over to your e-scribe, please, and we'll vote on that. the folks online are just going to have to roll with us as we are here, so. Okay, so I know that Councillor James had put her name in the queue, so do we have, let me just get back to my agenda here. We have this agenda item. I guess Clerk Will Short will speak to it briefly, and then we'll go to Councillor James.
Yeah, so, thanks, Chair. So in December of 2022, Council asked staff to bring back a terms of reference for a council remuneration advisory committee. As a part of the review, staff consulted with other municipalities on how they conducted their council remuneration reviews. There were multiple municipalities that had mixed results when using an advisory committee, and staff wanted to provide council with other options for this review. This report includes the terms of reference for the committee as directed, along with including a consultant to support the committee, an option to have a third-party consultant to conduct the review, or to maintain the status quo for the next term of council. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris, and thanks for bringing this forward. I would like to move option 2. I will just briefly state my reasonings behind that. I think given the council, the committee that was comprised and the work that you've done and recognizing that area municipalities suggested going with a consultant would be better, probably more effective and efficient. Option 3 was about status quo. And I think had there been a review within the past 3 years, I would more lean to supporting that, but we always question policy and reviewing policies here. And, you know, when you have a significant amount of time go through without reviewing policies, there can be gaps and barriers and things that we don't recognize, especially with time and place and things that have changed. So I would like to move option 2 for consideration of council.
Okay, we have a seconder with that, and we have a speakers list. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding when we decided to do this was that this review would also take into account the issue of, I don't know if you could say, hiring outside staff to support council. Was that not part of the intent?
Yeah, that's, I don't know if that was part of it.
Not the regional staff support, the, council being able to, what I thought was a very inequitable procedure that a member of council hire like outside support. I thought that this review was to look at that and have a discussion about whether or not that was actually going to be acceptable practice.
Do you recall us having a conversation? But I don't know the details of that. So yeah, Tim, go ahead, please.
So through the chair, that wasn't part of the record or the motion that council passed in December. The terms of reference that was contemplated for the advisory committee does look at staff support for council, not specifically hiring external staff, but to review the staff complement and what that appropriate level is for council. I would presume that should council pick option 2, that we would tie that in, that the scope for the committee would be tied into the consultant.
Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, I support option 2. Can someone remind me when we did the last review? I know we didn't at the last term of council and it ended badly.
Well, we did kind of, I guess, but that was kind of in the 11th hour, I guess I'd say. But yeah, there was a committee struck 2 terms ago.
That's correct. Yeah. So one wasn't struck last term, but one was struck the previous term to make recommendations for the 2018 to 2022
So
term.
it's probably been 7 or 8 years then.
Yep.
Okay.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I object to spending $50,000. I think just talking budget, talking money. I know when I was at the city, we had the committee, like a volunteer committee that looked and brought back their report.
I would support option 3 or option 2 without spending the $50,000. That seems a lot of money. And, you know, basically we decide anyway, like depending whatever the report says, so.
Okay, the clerk has an answer to that question.
So for the report, we wanted to put a dollar amount in. We'll work with procurement to get quotes, and we expect it to be less than 50,000. Just for council to know, we were basing it on what similar projects have cost from a consultant perspective in the past. So we wanted to put a dollar amount in so that there was something there. When we go out to get quotes, we would expect to work below the $50,000 range, just as a piece of information for council.
Okay, all right. All right, I guess I still support option 3.
Pardon me, Councillor Wolf? Okay, so we have an motion on the floor that we'll have to deal with first with regards to motion or option 2. So, you know, in this case, we're going to speak to that. We'll go to the vote. If it fails, then we're back to, you know, I guess 1 or 3. So, Chair Redmond.
Thank you. I will be supporting option 2. I would have to tell you, we didn't do it because of the pandemic and a whole bunch of extenuating circumstances. And nobody should do this job for money. But we all know that this is a lot of heavy lifting. And I think in order to attract, and this does not take into effect till the next council. So we're not feathering our own nests or trying to reward ourselves in any way. I would hope that it was up to 50,000. I take Councillor Fox or Wolf. There's too many animals on that side. Up to 50,000, it would be my preference, but I think that the credibility of having a third party look at this and do community consultation is really important so that the interface with the community can feel somewhat less personal and that they'll be able to talk to our constituents to find out what the right level is. So I do support this motion, although it does look like it maybe may cost a little more. In the long run, I think if we do it well, it'll be money well spent.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. I would echo very similar to what the chair was just saying in terms of, I think it is important, and certainly in terms of succession planning and stability of getting good candidates like those sitting around the table now for the future. These are things that we need to do. I'm hearing from the peanut gallery right now, though. Anyways. Yes. What I did want to ask, however, would this also include a review? I know I'd asked a while ago and I didn't see it on the tracking list, but that staff bring back our policy on chairs for committees and their remuneration, as that's obviously an additional component. Would this be inclusive of that? My apologies, I just missed it. But is it? Yep. Okay, never mind. Missed it. Sorry.
Okay, and you're good. So we'll no other speakers. So we'll get to the e-scribe for option 2, moved by Councillor James, seconded by Councillor Humanick. Councillor Nowak, if you want to just go up or down, maybe thumbs up, thumbs down. Okay, and that is carried and passed. So thank you, colleagues. So any other business? Councillor Craig.
I'll be very quick, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if after each vote, we couldn't put up on the screen for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, what the vote is.
Yeah.
I think it's important Want to know who my friends are? Okay.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
We're all friends.
Well, yeah, I'll ask the clerk's office if there's an opportunity
There's
that we can
possibility. I
just,
can make
I think there's always a play between those that are on Zoom and you got the video, but yeah, let's see if we can in the corner, or at least what have you, put that up for a little bit extended period of time. I know
Thank
we
you,
ran
Mr.
into an
Chair.
issue with that with Councillor Urbanovic at one point too. So yeah, there is a committee, council committee tracking list on 9.1 that's to be received for information. I've called for any other business, and I will ask for a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Councillor Foxton, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Get the animals in there, and please use your e-scribe.
There's not a sign that says don't feed the animals, is there?
And while we're voting, just a reminder that we will have our community services meeting June 19th, starting at TBD,
To be announced.
before council, and after this one.
Have a good time at FCM, all you guys that are going.
That's carried. Okay, everybody, take it
Are you
easy.
going? No, I'm not. That's right.